all we knew is that the books themselves have a massive, very supportive fan base and have since its release. And so many people grew up reading those books. So that, and that there was a great degree of anticipation on the films as a result of that. But then again, at the end of the day, we had no idea of knowing, and the impact was the impact. And it was kind of way bigger than all of us could have imagined, I suppose. The Lord of the Rings trilogy. It was the summer of 1997. It was Harry Knowles, who ran Ain't It Cool News at the time, who then told me the next day, hey man, did you see that about Peter Jackson? He's making Lord of the Rings trilogy. And I remember really specifically feeling that that made so much sense. I had seen Heavenly Creatures and I had seen The Frighteners. But it was Heavenly Creatures specifically that stood out to me as being a kind of incredible, it's not a one-to-one comp, but there's so much in Heavenly Creatures that establishes what he's capable of as a filmmaker, and marrying the notion of a fantasy realm with an emotional honesty and depth. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, Peter Jackson, that is such an incredible, inspired idea. And I'd not read Lord of the Rings, but I'd read The Hobbit, so I was certainly familiar with Middle-earth and the kind of milieu of Tolkien and what that was about. So just, marrying those two ideas in my head just made so much sense. And I remember at the time that Harry was like, you should be Frodo. I thought, that would be great, And I remember my agent calling me at the time and saying they're casting for Lord of the Rings. You should go in for Frodo. And I was like, yes, I would love to. But you can't read the script. You have to go into the casting office to read the script. They're not giving the script out. I was like, okay. So I remember I went to Victoria Burroughs' casting office, and I sat in an office by myself for 2 hours and read the script for The Fellowship of the Ring. I'll never forget that. And driving home, and I was so immersed in the world. It was so palpable and lifelike. It really kind of came to life off of the page. So I'd never made my own audition tape before, and this is long before the time when that was common. So it was long before that, and I just had this impulse, partially because I was a little nervous. Second, I just didn't want to go into a white room and do it that way. I was like, I got to do something different. So was going to a vocal coach or a dialect coach for the dialect, and then enlisted some friends, including George Wang, who's a writer, filmmaker. We went out to the woods, I think in Griffith Park, and shot 2 of the audition sequences there, and then 1 at my house. And it's sort of like there's 3 scenes, each one was sort of a different aspect of Frodo along the journey, the last one being kind of like quite deeply affected by the ring. The ring is mine. We went into the Miramax offices that night, when Miramax was still a thing, and cut the scenes together. And then I took that tape, output to VHS. I took that tape to Victoria Burroughs' office, and then they FedExed it to Peter. I got a call from Peter himself, which was amazing, totally mind-blowing, and, the adventure and opportunity of a lifetime. What must I do?
We must leave, and leave quickly.
Where? Where do I go?
Get out of the Shire. Make for the village of Bree.
Going into it, there was absolutely an understanding of the enormity of the adventure and the fact that we were literally going to live in New Zealand for a very long time, which was thrilling.
I think we should get off the road.
What was that feeling, stepping into the shoes, the hobbit feet of Frodo for the first time?
Thrilling, really exciting. But I have to say that, there was a buzz. Of course, there was a buzz of excitement of, now we're actually shooting, here we go. But we had time very well spent prior, 2 months and change prior to actually shooting, of the team getting to know each other, rehearsals, talking about the characters, sword lessons, horseback riding lessons in some cases, rowing lessons, dialect coach. Just this program of preparation. that we were all a part of, kind of like this boot camp. And by the time we started shooting, we were so entrenched with each other and the film that we were making that yes, it was a buzzy day and super exciting and like, oh my God, we're really doing it, for sure. But there was also this like, we were in already in a great way. You know, we had spent so much time already locked arm in arm, you know, as a fellowship heading on this journey together. They had made these boots, because part of the thing, it was very much in the infancy of the internet as it pertains to eyes being on productions and spies and so on and so forth. But it was happening. And there were people trying to get photos of us in costume. And so they were trying to dissuade that from happening. And they had us in big robes, you know, in between shots and whenever we were traveling from place to place in case we were photographed. And they had these big boots, in part to protect the feet themselves, but also to like cover them up. And there were these big boots that we could put on and cover our feet walking around. And so, yeah, I just remember that, like walking from our trailer in these big green, like fabric boots, covering our feet and these robes is awesome. And that, you know, to start with that scene too, with the 4 hobbits was really lovely.
Frodo! Mary, it's Frodo Baggins. Hello, Frodo.
We'd already formed a real bond, and so to start with that material, which starts really fun.
Overreacted. Run!
We're falling down this hill after Merry and Pippin are running away from Farmer Maggot's field after stealing a bunch of vegetables. And then we fall, and it's this sort of hilarious moment. And then the realization that we're on the road and we have to get off the road.
Get off the road! Quick!
And this sense that something's coming was just a blast. And fun to play that material first. It was sort of a perfect thing to start with. We're about to hit the 20th anniversary of the release of Fellowship of the Ring this December, and it's definitely been on our minds. And weirdly, the memories that stick out the most are not the ones that are the most expected. So like, obviously, getting in a helicopter and flying to the top of a mountain is an incredible thing. And there are so many of those grand memories. But the memories that stick out the most are the sort of mundane things. It's like the 3 hours between setups where we'd go to each other's trailers and take a nap or play video games, or after working a 16, 17-hour day, still wanting to go out for dinner, going for brunch on weekends, you know, renting videos at Arrow Street Video Store, and like, it's the life of it, because it was our lives, you know. And it was funny coming back from that. It was so difficult to articulate to people what it was like to have made it and be there. And then the sort of subsequent time, so there was 16 months of principal photography. We shot all 3 films at once. And then I remember getting the call for the pickups, and that was a unique thing. It wasn't pre-planned. So it was like a couple months after we got home, got the call, like, hey, so we're gonna have everyone come back. And we were like, yeah, great. It wasn't over, because we'd gone through this whole process of saying goodbye, you know, which was look, it's hard enough to say goodbye after a month, 2 months on a film. It was really hard to say goodbye after 16 months, especially when your life is displaced. You know, when you're not home anymore, your home is there. So to get to come back for each subsequent film was a joy. And yeah, miss New Zealand still. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And obviously seen all of Michel Gondry's videos up to that point. And just, I would have done anything in that film. It wouldn't have mattered. Prior to that, and certainly post that, that became probably the primary motivator for me as an actor, is just wanting to work with creatives that I love, and wanting to be a part of facilitating whatever it is that their vision is. became kind of the driving force behind any decisions that I ever had or could make as it pertains to being an actor in something. It's just, I just wanted to be a part of whatever they were doing. And the script was incredible. And then the cast they amassed was amazing. And it was just, so fortunate to get to be a part of that film. It still remains one of my favorite films, regardless of whether I was in it or not. I just think that movie is a masterpiece. It's so emotional. It's kind of upsetting. Jim's performance in that film is one of the best of his career, I think, still. The sort of emotional vulnerability that he achieved was really amazing. Kate Winslet, getting a chance to work with Kate was such a joy. I'd been a fan of hers since Heavenly Creatures. Mark Ruffalo, Kirsten, who I knew from growing up a little bit. I'd seen her around. Just an amazing, Tom Wilkinson too. The cast was so rad.
Yes?
Can I help you?
You mean?
Can I help you with something?
To be in service of Michelle's vision too on a daily basis, and so much of that was in camera. There was one scene that sort of changed everything for everybody. I was always so excited, but one scene that kind of exemplified what the movie was for the crew and for the cast. And it's a scene in the film it's a oneer. So it takes Kate and Jim from their house in Montauk through a hallway. They had fashioned like part of that house into this actual, real, practical hallway of the hospital or the doctor's office. He runs into the doctor's office.
Wake me up!
And he sees himself talking to Tom Wilkinson, the doctor. And so the camera's panning. He then changed his clothes, became the patient that he's observing. Camera pans around and it's back to Jim observing himself. And then I'm in the background fumbling with some papers.
Who's that?
So it was this incredible oneer where two versions of Jim exist in the same shot by way of him having to change his clothes. It was incredible. And you saw it in camera there was no trickery, it just was. And I remember that night, the entire crew went out for drinks for the first time. It was the second week, I think it was the end of the second week. And it was electric, this feeling of we're making something incredible. And we could all see it for the first time. And it was really, really special. That was a great, great experience. Sin City. First off, getting to be a part of that was such a dream. Love the graphic novels. It's weird, the timing of it. I'd read through all of it and then went out to dinner with Robert and he said, I'm making Sin City. And I was like, holy I just read these books. And in my head, as I was reading them, I was thinking, man, it would be amazing to see this animated because the artwork is so beautiful and so specific. And so we were out at dinner and he's like, yeah, my next project is Sin City. Do you want to see some of it? And he had shot that opening sequence with Josh Hartnett out on the roof.
The wind rises electric.
He had shot that as a proof of concept, both for Frank Miller to prove that he could bring the stories to life in such a way that would look like the work that he had drawn, and also as a proof of concept to get the movie made. So I go out to his car, and on his computer is that scene that he had already shot, and it was it was a game changer. Holy you've done it! It is exactly like the comic. And so then he asked me to audition, and my audition process was to go into, he was holding auditions at the Four Seasons in LA, and I went into a hotel room, and I put on glasses, and he's like, I'm just gonna read passages from the comic, from the graphic novel, and you just stare at the camera. That was my audition. There was no physicality at all. And I got the role, obviously.
What kind? So I sniff around to see what's buried.
It was a joy to be able to work in that space. And then, we were working off of the comics. The graphic novel was the storyboard. So every panel of the graphic novel was shot and realized. So you literally had the blueprint for the film in the graphic novel, which was such an incredible and electrifying feeling. Because you know it well, and you're like, we're shooting that shot in that frame, in that frame.
It's impossible. Nobody can sneak up on me. I go blind.
But then Frank was also coming up with new frames offset, and was there very much present to sort of comment on, this is right, this is what Kevin would do, this is what Kevin wouldn't do. It was great, amazing. And I shot all of my scenes in 2 days, because predominantly the movie was shot against blue or green screen. They had a few sets, the bar was a set, and there were a couple others, but most of it was a green screen. And Mickey Rourke had already shot his scenes, so I shot everything with Mickey's stunt double. Yeah, and like did some wire work, which I'd never done. So I'm up on wires doing high kicks, and it was awesome. It was so much fun. And fun to play a villain. I'd never played a villain or psychopath before, certainly not a mute one. Wilfred. I think I was open to TV and certainly open to comedy. I think that was also something that I was actively looking for, was just something in the comedy space, because I really had not had much experience in comedy, and I was excited about that as a challenge, and also just being a fan of comedy. And this script just came about and was sent to me, and I lost it. Like, the pilot script was deeply funny. I then researched, because I knew that it was based on a pre-existing series that was based on a short film from Australia. So I watched bits of the original series and loved it at how weird and dark it was. And Wilfred was this crazy amalgam of really weird, super funny. Also, it had heart. You know, at the core, it is about a man who might be losing his grip on reality, has some mental health issues. So there's also something very human about what's our approach to this version of Wilfred. And it was a joy. It was 4 years of, every year for 3 months out of the year, we'd have a laugh. It was really fun to be a part of that.
What theatre are we going to?
AMC.
And working at FX was great. You know, it felt like we were these sort of, we were the rogues making the weird talking dog show.
Very nice. Some sofas, it's impossible to get comfortable, not this one.
My favorite parts of that show, the weirder it got, the better it got. Those are my favorite episodes, where it's like, what the f*** is going on? It was a joy. And it was endlessly entertaining to watch Jason do what he did. That character is so his creation, and it really did allow him to go to so many different places. So from episode to episode, there was constant manipulation coming from that character, and it could be so many things. And it was really, really thrilling and hilarious to watch and to be a part of. It was great. And great to be on a part of television, too. It was a different experience for me. Coming from film, the pace is a lot slower on films. TV is fast. And, we were working 6 to 8 pages a day of dialogue, burning through material really quickly. And I was not used to that pace. And I found it exhilarating, so much fun. You're kind of going, and there's no waiting around, which I really enjoyed. It was fun. It definitely keeps you on your toes. Maniac. And this one, once I read it and understood what the sort of intention behind it was, I recognized that it was very different. I mean, primarily because most of the movie is in POV. Sort of reminded me of this great movie from, I think, the 60s called Peeping Tom, which has similar elements in POV. So that was really thrilling. The fact that you wouldn't really see the character except for these sort of out-of-body experiences he has when he kills his victims and in sort of reflections in mirrors. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. To play the primary villain and murderer and not really see him, but also experience what he's doing through him was a pretty thrilling idea. I was a fan of Alex Aja's first film, High Tension, which had a really great twist at the end. And so the fact that Alex was a part of it and Frank Calfoun was the director was just this really interesting creative package with a very unique approach. And again, and what's funny, and I remember this really specifically as well, they were like, oh, you only need to work for like, I think the proposal was a week to shoot all of your stuff on camera, and then you don't have to be there. And I went in for a meeting and I was like, no, I think I need to be there every day. They're like, oh, would you? And I'm like, well, I need to be a part of the decision-making process of the operator, who is effectively my character, to work out what he or she is going to do to portray the character. You know, once we actually got into production, we all kind of realized how much more to that process was there than any of us had anticipated. Because then, being there every day on set, it became this really interesting creative process of deconstructing a scene. We would always rehearse it with the cast without the camera operator, and Maxime, who was our DP and primary operator, would watch, and so we would block it like a regular scene. And then Maxime would insert himself and figure out logistically how that would work with the camera. And then on top of that, I would find ways to get in, like with my arm into frame. I had a double, so if it was two hands coming into frame, occasionally one would use the left and one would use the right, things like that. So it became this really interesting dance of choreography every day on set, trying to figure out a way to be a part of it physically.
Changing your makeup and hairstyle didn't fool me. You didn't think I'd recognize you? Why? Because you think I'm stupid? Why do you act like I don't exist?
And also just kind of semi-directing that process, you know, as an actor and figuring it out. It was the most the most intimately I've worked with a DP before, and it was a total joy. So it was kind of a part played in like 3 layers, because there was this sort of off-camera aspect with the DP, and then there was the on-camera aspect, finding these reflection shots, and we found more. There were sort of many scripted reflections in the movie, and as we were going, we would just pick them up and see, oh, well, there's a way to get a reflection here and a way to see him here. So we did that too. So there was a real sense of discovery on the process. And then it was the voiceover, and I re-recorded all of the dialogue in a voiceover studio. So filled in breaths and presence in ways that we couldn't have thought of at the time, that I was able to sort of dial in post. And that's sort of where the character came to life, was in the voice, really, because there's so much of him you don't see. It was a very fun, creative process. Really loved it. And the film's really beautiful, actually. For a gruesome horror movie about a psychopath, there is real kind of beauty to it. Grand piano. The making of that film is incredible. It still remains one of my favorite experiences ever making a movie. Eugenio Mira is one of my favorite directors, and he's just a dear friend of mine, and we had a really incredible experience making it. But the interesting thing about the bulk of the film takes place in real time. It's during a concert, a piano classical performance, both with an orchestra and also solo piano. And it takes place in real time over that performance. So the music is baked into the structure of the movie. And so he had also cut together an animatic of the movie, of basically like an active storyboard of the way that the film was going to be shot, as it was also cut to the music very specifically. So, you know, this bar here, the camera does this. This bar here, it's on his hands. Really, really specific, which was an incredible document for me to have in terms of the preparation, to know where I would be at any given time as it pertains to the music. But then there was also just the music, which is incredibly complex, even for a classically trained pianist. Specifically La Cinquette, which is the unplayable piece?
More than it seems Emma ever did. Holding your hand, orchestrating your return to the stage.
So It was a couple things. It was like trying to learn that music very quickly, which was impossible because I didn't play piano. I took lessons when I was young, but this was like sort of starting from scratch. So there was like some I was pulling from, certainly hand placement and basic scales, but in terms of the degree that this was demanding, I couldn't play that. So it was scary and daunting, but it also became a game of being in the right place at the right time with my hands and playing along rhythmically. It sort of became the thing. So I did a number of weeks with a teacher in LA and then went to Barcelona. And then the person who ultimately was my hand double in the film also was my teacher there. And so the cool thing about production, again, being so specifically linked to those moments of music so specifically, is that on the call sheet every day, we would have images from the animatic along with what bar of music that it corresponded to. So I could really specifically like learn those parts. And it would stretch anywhere from 5 to 20 seconds or 30 seconds. So it then became really specific about, okay, we're doing this bit, let's learn this and get this right, which was super helpful, as opposed to biting off a massive amount. However, La Cinquette, from the moment it starts, for the first, I'd have to look at the film to remember exactly, but it stays on me for a very long time.
Tom, you hear me? Tom. You're playing beautifully, Tom. You're playing great. But you need to ease up, Tom. You hear me? Ease up. You're gonna tire out your fingers.
So the first part of that song, I had to learn-ish pretty well. And it doesn't, that's me, like, playing along to it. But anyway, the way that is constructed is a really good mixture of ultimately, there was definitely a hand double for some close-up shots to sell it really well. There's a specific shot I remember, actually, that was it was a track around the piano that was constantly rotating. So for bits, it would cover me and my hands talking at the same time. And that was like patting your head and rubbing your belly. It was so, like, my brain was doing this. Like, I can't.
Isn't this what you wanted? You said yourself she was a muddler, muddling your whole life, it seems.
You don't know anything.
But I do, Tom. She might get more magazine covers than you, but you are a person of note. She won't be in the history books. You will.
And I'm hearing, because Cusack was with us for a week and wasn't with us the rest of the times, because he was only on camera for X amount of scenes. The rest of the time he's in my ear. So he recorded all of the dialogue of his conversations with me through the earpiece prior. So when he was gone, we did the entire concert without him. And so I'm hearing audio of him talking as well as the audio of the music simultaneously, having to keep that going whilst then hearing him and speak. Yeah, dude, so hard. Thankfully, that only had to happen a couple of times. Come to Daddy. Ant Timpson is a dear friend, producer, Kiwi. I had worked with Ant, actually. We had produced a movie together. So Ant sent me the script as a friend and was like, hey, I kind of have you in mind for this. Would you read this? And I read it and fell in love with it immediately. It still remains sort of one of the most taut, surprising scripts I've ever read. It kept going places that I didn't anticipate it going. I just didn't see it coming. And so many threads that are introduced are paid off in a really beautiful way. It's just a very taut genre exercise that starts as one thing and ends as another thing. And I was all in. And then the character, Norval, is, and it's funny because he sent me an email with the script and then also a picture of Skrillex. He said, this is the character. And I was like, okay. So his and Skrillex is, I've met him, he's a very nice guy, but the idea of Norval is that he's meant to be a douchebag. Skrillex is not. He's meant to be this sort of like, I DJ and, I'm an influencer and big in music and, also has terrible fashion sense, but thinks he has amazing fashion sense. And he's sort of this like amalgam of all these ideas, which was really fun to play. His hairstyle is insane. Ant's impulses, I have to say, initially were like, whoa, we gotta rein this in. Because there's a fine line with a character like that of, he has to be at some point relatable because what he goes through is intense and harrowing. And you can't hate him. You have to like have a little disdain for him, but you also have to see his vulnerabilities. And ultimately, you have to care about him. So it was really important to me to find that balance of like douchiness and ridiculousness, whilst also believing that it exists in the real world somehow and is somewhat grounded, which was a process of discovery, and it was really fun. We shot up in Vancouver Island in a small town called Tofino. And yeah, the wardrobe was a thing that we found with the costume designer and tried a bunch of different things. And yeah, the hair was awesome. And I was all in. I think what's really fun about those kinds of opportunities is to just dive in and sort of, like don't toe dip, like go for it. And we did. And yeah, the mustache was rad. Norval's like a sad little guy. The thing about Norval too is he's been estranged from his father since he was 5. Ultimately, the story is about a man reuniting with his father for the first time since he was a toddler, basically. And so, there's that heart and anticipation, and then there's this sort of expression of douchiness, and then it takes a whole other turn. No Man of God. It sort of feels like a play, a little. It's based on true events and true meetings. It's based on the recollections and transcripts, in some cases, of these interviews and conversations that Bill Hagmaier, the FBI agent, had with Ted Bundy in the last 4 years prior to his execution. It is an exploration of that psyche, of what it takes to be that person. It's a fascinating story. I didn't know, I've read a lot about Ted Bundy and others over the years, just out of morbid fascination, but never knew this story. I didn't know about Hagmaier. I didn't know about the fact that, Bundy considered him his best friend and willed his last earthly possessions to him. He considered him that much of a friend that he willed everything to Bill at the end of his life, which Bill did not accept, ultimately, with understandable reasons. So that's a fascinating thing, that this man, considered an FBI agent his best friend and confidant. Now, Bill wouldn't consider the same of Ted. But that's sort of at the core of the story. There's a kind of central thesis to the movie, which is this idea of Ted being fascinated with the notion that anyone could be capable of doing what he does, that he's not crazy. And I think that's a defense mechanism, certainly, and a sort of, the expression of a man that's facing his death, ultimately. And so for Bill, it's also about, whether or not he thinks he could with that question, and just sort of going through this process. And ultimately, there's a part of that job, which is to gain information and understanding. And that's really what he was there for. And in the midst of all of that, there is a human connection that happens. And I think that's at the core of the film as well. And I think one of the things that's most fascinating, because, I suppose, you could call him a monster, and he did monstrous things, but at the end of the day, he was a flawed, up human. And there were two human beings that had a human connection, And that's just fascinating. So it's just, there's been so many characterizations of Bundy over the years, so many different amazing documentaries and films. And this was just a different story that I think really fascinated and sort of haunted us,